Dr. Koop is a sports psychologist who works with some of the best athletes on the planet. He's based out of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, less than a 30-minute drive from where I live. After speaking with him on a number of occasions, Doc Koop, as people call him, offered to come and speak to a group of young athletes that I also worked with in Cary. The kids were high school aged at the time, and they definitely enjoyed his seminar, but nobody enjoyed it more than me. I must have talked with Dr. Koop for an hour after the session was over. You see, towards the end of the seminar, we started focusing on habits. Habits, good and bad, that work their way into our lives. Doc talked about how bad habits often appear without our knowledge or consent, and we're often blind as to what to do about them. Tiger Woods actually hired Doc Koop to spend an entire week watching him practice before a big tournament. Doc talked about how Tiger was the best player on the planet at the time because he had the best practice habits of any athlete in any sport that he's ever witnessed. After Tiger's infamous fall from grace and battle with injuries prevented him from practicing, he had many bad habits that needed to be dealt with to regain his dominance. Doc Koop again worked with Tiger in 2013 when Tiger won 5 times that season, as well as the Comeback Player of the Year award. After that season, Tiger thought that he was fixed and no longer needed help with his bad habits. 3 years later and counting, Tiger has yet to win again on the PGA Tour. Coincidence? Well, who knows? But it's often not until we break down our habits and monkey with them a bit that we can recreate the habits needed to win in any walk of life. Bad habits often don't go away. They're in the background waiting to reappear until we choke them out with newer, better habits. Dr. Koop gave great examples of the bad habits that Lee Janzen, Davis Love, and Tiger Woods all had on the PGA Tour during actual tournaments. Davis Love, in 2015, well past his prime, remains one of the most respected players to ever play on the PGA Tour. However, he used to be a bit of a hothead. The same with 2-time US Open champion Lee Janzen. Studies showed that after a bad shot in which they would slam a club or even throw a club out of frustration, their score on the next hole would suffer. After letting the players know of this stat, this great insight or market intelligence, after this was learned, they promised to control their emotions or bad habits and stop throwing clubs. They were motivated to stop the bad behavior, especially after they were educated on how statistically it was costing them shots in a tournament, which meant it was costing them money, lots of money. Fast forward a few months later, and the club throwing continued. They simply needed a release after certain bad shots. Dr. Koop worked with them to change this. Davis Love began the process of untying and tying his shoe to replace throwing a club. Lee Janzen opted for taking his golf towel and cleaning a grip or two on a club to release his frustration versus throwing a club. When I would see these players performing these better habits on TV, I would smile and think, good job, Doc Koop. You just helped change the habit. A bad shot that acted as the cue needed a new routine. Doc Koop worked with the players to find a routine that would allow them to relieve the frustration of a bad shot and earn the reward of better scoring. In The Power of Habit, we learned that the golden rule of habit, you keep the cue and the reward, but experiment with a new routine. Dr. Koop helped reshape the habits on the PGA Tour by recognizing that many players couldn't just stop a bad habit cold turkey. When the bad shot or cue occurred, they need to replace the bad habit of throwing clubs with a new routine that would allow them to calm down and score better. That's the reward. Players to this day are still experimenting with replacing the bad behavior with other better behaviors. Some are still throwing clubs, and if you're a golfer, you most likely can empathize at least a little with their rationale. Throwing clubs may be costing them money, but dang, it just feels good sometimes. Remember, professionally and personally, the brain can be reprogrammed. So 5 quick tips to habit change. Number 1, be aware of the cue or trigger of your habits. Number 2, be aware of the reward that causes you to participate in the habit. Number 3 is change up the routine. And number 4, Be prepared to experiment. Your awareness is key, so don't be afraid to call an audible and change things up on a regular basis. And finally, your attitude. You must believe that you're capable of developing habits that will allow you to double or triple your productivity and accomplish things that have been out of reach in the past. Don't be afraid to win, whatever your winning happens to be. You're doing great. Let's move on after you knock down these 5 quick questions.